I'm Olivia Parker, 32, an art curator from Boston who once shared everything with my younger sister Madeline. We were inseparable until the day I discovered I wasn't invited to her wedding. It's just a small one, my mother said dismissively, as if that explained erasing me from the most important day in my sister's life. So I booked a solo trip to Iceland instead, never imagining their perfect day would spectacularly fall apart while I stood beneath the northern lights. The frantic calls started coming just as I was finding myself among glaciers and volcanoes. Before I take you through this emotional roller coaster, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to your own family. You'll want to stick around to see how I found my voice in the land of fire and ice. Despite our 5-year age gap, Madeline and I grew up as best friends in our suburban Massachusetts home, with matching bedrooms and secret languages only we understood. As the older sister, I naturally took on the protector role, shielding her from our family dynamics that weren't always picture-perfect. Our father buried himself in his accounting work, rarely home before 9, while our mother channeled her perfectionism into crafting flawless family appearances and redirecting most of her attention toward Madeline. Maybe it was because Madeline was the baby, with her golden curls and infectious laugh. But she quickly became the family star. I didn't mind much growing up. I adored my little sister and felt proud watching her shine at dance recitals and school plays while I cheered from the audience with my disposable camera. Our bond only seemed to strengthen through high school, even as I prepared for college. I helped Madeline with everything from math homework to boy troubles, and she looked at me like I held all the answers. When it came time for me to leave for NYU, 12-year-old Madeline cried for days, making me promise to call every night and visit monthly. I kept those promises, spending most of my weekends and holidays with her rather than making college, friends, or joining study groups. After graduation, I moved back to Boston, partly to be closer to family, especially Madeline, who was entering her senior year of high school. The sacrifices continued naturally, almost without my noticing. I helped her perfect her college applications, editing essays late into the night, despite my own exhaustion from starting my museum career. When she got into Columbia with a partial scholarship, I secretly contributed to her tuition from my entry-level salary because our parents claimed they couldn't afford the remainder. Throughout her college years, I was her emotional support system, answering panic-filled calls during finals week and rushing to New York when her first serious boyfriend broke her heart. My apartment became her weekend sanctuary whenever city life overwhelmed her. When Madeline met Ryan during her final semester, I listened to hours of details about their dates and helped her analyze his text messages. Ryan came from the kind of wealth our family had always orbited around but never quite accessed. His father owning a successful investment firm with political connections our parents could only dream about. I was genuinely excited when they got engaged just 8 months after graduation, seeing how happy he made her despite my private concerns about their whirlwind romance. The wedding planning began immediately, with my apartment transforming into unofficial headquarters during those first few weeks. We spent evenings surrounded by bridal magazines, sample invitations, and champagne, dreaming up her perfect day together. "You'll be my maid of honor, obviously. I couldn't do this without you," Madeline declared one night, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she squeezed my hand. I felt that familiar warmth of being needed, of our unbreakable sister bond. But subtle shifts began occurring. As Madeline spent more time with Ryan's friends, sophisticated women from prep school backgrounds who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. She began canceling our weekly dinners. Her texts became less frequent. And when we did meet, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone. I noticed her adopting new phrases, changing her wardrobe, even adjusting her laugh to something more restrained. I told myself this was normal, just my sister growing into her new life. But deep down, watching her transform into someone I barely recognized felt like losing a piece of myself. The first real sting came 3 months into wedding planning when Madeline asked to meet for coffee to discuss something important. I arrived early, ordering her favorite caramel latte, imagining she needed help with venue selections or wanted my opinion on wedding colors. Instead, she nervously informed me that Ryan's sister Veronica would be her maid of honor. His family is contributing more financially to the wedding, she explained, avoiding my eyes. It's really more of a political decision than anything else. The words hit like a physical blow, but I managed to smile through the pain. Of course, I understand. I'd love to be a bridesmaid instead, I offered, though the demotion from her promised role hurt more than I wanted to admit. Madeline seemed relieved by my easy acceptance, quickly changing the subject to her upcoming dress appointment, promising to send photos. Those photos never came. In fact, details about the wedding became increasingly scarce. I learned about the selected venue from our mother rather than Madeline. When I texted congratulations, her response was a quick, thanks, with no elaboration. One Saturday morning, I called to confirm our standing brunch date, only to have Madeline answer amid chattering female voices. Oh, Liv, I can't today. We're actually bridesmaid dress shopping. The we clearly didn't include me. I thought you said that wasn't happening until next month, I managed to respond, remembering our previous conversation. Plans changed. Veronica found this amazing boutique with a cancellation. I meant to tell you, she replied, the background voices growing impatient. After hanging up, I spent the day creating Pinterest boards with bridesmaid dress options in the burgundy color scheme she'd mentioned weeks earlier. I researched venues similar to the one she'd chosen, compiling a list of recommended photographers who specialized in that particular lighting and setting. My efforts to stay involved continued despite the growing distance. I sent thoughtful texts checking in on wedding plans, offered to address invitations, and even suggested handling the wedding website since I had experience with similar projects at work. Most went unanswered or received brief, dismissive responses. Already handled. Or, Veronica's cousin is doing that. The real gut punch came when I visited our parents' home and discovered my mother helping Madeline organize a wedding planning WhatsApp group. Scrolling through her phone to show Mom something, I glimpsed the group named Maddie's Dream Day with over 15 members, including our cousins and aunts. My name was noticeably absent. "You're not in the group?" Mom asked. When she noticed my expression, before quickly adding, "I'm sure it's just for the wedding party, nothing important." That evening, I finally confronted Madeline by phone, asking directly why I was being excluded from wedding plans. Her response left me speechless. "You're making this about you, Olivia. This is my wedding, not another opportunity for you to control everything." Control everything? When had I ever controlled her? I'd spent my life supporting her dreams, not dictating them. But my protests only led to accusations of jealousy and self-centeredness, ending with Madeline hanging up. The following weeks brought more painful realizations. My mother began making casual comments about my appearance whenever wedding discussions arose. "You might want to start that diet now if you want to look good in the photos," or, "Have you considered highlights? Your natural color might clash with the bridesmaids' dresses." Each comment reinforced that I wasn't meeting some unspoken standard for my sister's picture-perfect day. Despite the growing anxiety knot in my stomach whenever the wedding was mentioned, I continued trying. I sent Madeline articles about meaningful sister wedding traditions, offered to host a bridal shower, and even suggested helping with honeymoon planning since I'd recently coordinated a museum tour through the Italian regions they planned to visit. Each attempt was met with increasing coldness, as if my very effort to stay connected had become an annoyance. By the time spring arrived, 6 months before the October wedding, I felt like I was desperately trying to hold on to a relationship that had already slipped away. The complete exclusion happened on a rainy Tuesday evening, during what should have been a routine family dinner at my parents' house. Madeline arrived late with wedding invitation samples, spreading them across the dining table after our mother cleared the plates. The ornate ivory and gold cards featured intricate calligraphy and custom illustrations of the Boston Public Garden where Ryan had proposed. As everyone admired the designs, I reached for one to examine the details more closely. That's when my mother gently pulled the sample from my hand, saying, "These are just for reference, dear. We need to finalize the guest count first." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "When do you need my guest information?" I asked, assuming I'd be permitted a +1 even though I wasn't currently dating anyone. The uncomfortable silence that followed filled the room like a toxic gas. My father suddenly became fascinated with his coffee cup, refusing to make eye contact. Madeline exchanged a quick glance with our mother before clearing her throat. "Actually, Liv, we're keeping the wedding really small," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Just immediate family and close friends." I stared at her, confused. "But I am immediate family. I'm your sister." My mother jumped in, her practiced social smile firmly in place. "What Madeline means is that with venue restrictions and budget constraints, we've had to make some difficult decisions about the guest list." Budget constraints? With Ryan's family wealth and my parents emptying their savings to contribute? "So I'm not invited to my only sister's wedding?" I asked plainly, needing to hear the words directly. Madeline fidgeted with her engagement ring. "It's complicated, Olivia. The venue has strict capacity limits, and Ryan's family has business connections that need to be accommodated." The conversation deteriorated from there, with circular explanations that never quite addressed the central question: how could they exclude me? I left that dinner in a daze, the reality not fully sinking in until days later when I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a book my father had mentioned wanting to read. They weren't home, but using my spare key, I let myself in to leave, the book on his desk. That's when I noticed the preliminary guest list printed out and marked up with my mother's neat handwriting on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't look, but something compelled me to scan the names. The small, intimate wedding included over 200 guests. Ryan's distant cousins from Australia were flying in. My parents' golf friends from the country club made the cut. Even Madeline's freshman year college roommate, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, was invited. Everyone, it seemed, except me. As I stood frozen in my parents' kitchen, I heard my mother's voice from the backyard. Through the window, I could see her on the phone, pacing by her garden. "Yes, Sandra. The invitations go out next week. No, Olivia won't be attending." Between us, she would just draw attention away from Madeline. You know how she is. Always has to be the center of attention with her quirky outfits and strong opinions. This is Madeline's special day. We need everything perfect. I left before she could discover me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely drive. The final pieces fell into place over the next few weeks. Through social media, I discovered a lavish bridal shower had been held at Ryan's mother's estate in Connecticut. Photos showed Madeline surrounded by women in pastels, opening gifts and playing wedding games. Our female cousins, aunts, family, friends, all were there, celebrating while I remained ignorant the event was even happening. My best friend Taylor, outraged on my behalf, became my emotional support through this period. "This is beyond messed up, Liv," she said during one of our emergency wine nights after I discovered the bridal shower photos. "Family doesn't do this to each other." Encouraged by Taylor's indignation, I made one last attempt to understand by confronting Madeline directly. I drove to her apartment unannounced, determined to have an honest conversation. Initially surprised, to see me, she reluctantly invited me in. The conversation started civilly but quickly unraveled. "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about this," Madeline said after I expressed how hurt I felt. "It's just one day." "One day that represents our family bond," I countered. "One day I've helped you plan for months. One day we've talked about since we were kids playing wedding with pillowcases on our heads." "That was before you became so difficult," she replied, waving her hand dismissively. "Difficult how? By supporting you your entire life. See, this is exactly what I mean. You always bring up how much you've done for me like I'm supposed to be eternally grateful. Maybe if you had a boyfriend or better job, you'd understand the pressure I'm under to make this perfect. Her words sliced through me, revealing what she really thought. In her eyes, my single status and museum career made me somehow less worthy than her friends with husbands and corporate jobs. I left her apartment without resolution, breaking down in my car before I could even leave her parking lot. Taylor found me there an hour later, still unable to drive, having called her in tears. "This isn't about a wedding invitation," she said, holding me while I sobbed. "This is about your family choosing appearance over love, and it says everything about them, not you." 3 weeks before the wedding, my parents invited me to dinner at their house, an unusual request given the tension between us. Hope flickered briefly, thinking perhaps they'd reconsidered, that Madeline had changed her mind. I arrived with a peace offering, a bottle of my father's favorite whiskey. The evening started pleasantly enough with careful conversation about neutral topics, work, the weather, neighborhood developments. Then, as my mother served dessert, Madeline arrived unexpectedly. My pulse quickened, reading the choreographed nature of this family gathering. "Olivia," my mother began, placing her hand over mine with practiced sympathy. "We've been thinking about ways you could still be involved in the wedding." I waited, listening as she explained their solution. I could help with setup the day before and cleanup afterward. I could organize the guest book table and make sure elderly relatives found their seats. I wouldn't be in any official photos, of course, but I could be there in spirit. I stared at them, this family who couldn't see the humiliation they were offering. "Let me understand," I said slowly. "I'm not good enough to be a guest at my sister's wedding, but I'm good enough to be the unpaid help?" Madeline's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why you're not invited. You've always been jealous of me, and this is my special time. Not everything is about you, Olivia." Something broke inside me at that moment, a final thread snapping, after years of strain. Without another word, I stood, grabbed my purse, and walked out, ignoring my mother's calls to come back and be reasonable. That night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and began searching flights, not even sure where I wanted to go. An advertisement for Iceland appeared, showing otherworldly landscapes of black sand beaches and blue glaciers. On impulse, I checked dates coinciding with the wedding weekend in October. The northern lights would be visible then, the crowds would be smaller than summer, and most importantly, it was literally an ocean away from my family's drama. By dawn, I had booked a 10-day solo trip to Iceland, complete with guided tours of ice caves, whale-watching expeditions, and a rental car for exploring coastal villages. The confirmation email in my inbox felt like the first deep breath after nearly drowning. The following weeks transformed into a different kind of preparation than I'd anticipated for October. Instead of shopping for a bridesmaid dress or planning a toast, I bought waterproof hiking boots, thermal undergarments, and a professional-grade camera. I researched Icelandic phrases and local customs, downloaded offline maps, and joined forums for solo female travelers. Each preparation step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, building something new from the wreckage of my family relationships. When I told my parents about the trip, their reaction was predictably self-centered. "How could you abandon your sister during her wedding?" my mother demanded, ignoring the fact that I'd already been abandoned first. "This childish stunt only proves Madeline was right about you." My father, ever conflict avoidant, simply asked if I'd purchased travel insurance, as if potential bad weather was more concerning than our family falling apart. Madeline's response came via text. "I heard about your dramatic vacation. I'd expect you to be mature enough to put your jealousy aside for my wedding, but I guess that was asking too much." I didn't respond, focusing instead on preparing for my adventure. Each day brought new details to arrange, new skills to learn. I practiced photography techniques for capturing the northern lights. I studied Icelandic geology to better appreciate the volcanic landscapes I'd soon witness. My apartment transformed from wedding central to expedition headquarters, travel guides replacing bridal magazines. 5 days before my departure, my mother called in a panic. Apparently, the wedding coordinator was having disagreements with the venue manager. 2 bridesmaids were fighting over their dresses, and the florals might not match the exact shade of burgundy Madeline had specified. "We really need your organizational skills right now," she pleaded, as if I hadn't been excluded from every previous planning session. "Can't you cancel your trip? Madeline is overwhelmed with wedding emergencies." The irony wasn't lost on me. After months of making me feel superfluous, they suddenly considered me essential, but only for crisis management. "I'm sorry, but my flights are non-refundable," I replied calmly. "I'm sure Veronica and the wedding party can handle it." The night before my flight, as I finished packing, my phone buzzed constantly with texts from family members. My aunt asking if I was really missing Madeline's special day. My cousin suggesting I stop being dramatic and think about someone else for once. And finally, Madeline herself. Mom's freaking out and the wedding planner quit. "If you cared at all about me, you'd step up. But I guess Iceland is more important than family." I turned my phone off, zipped my suitcase closed, and went to bed. The next morning, boarding my flight to Reykjavik, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders for the first time in months. As the plane took off, I imagined the chaos unfolding back home, but for once, I wasn't responsible for fixing it. Iceland greeted me with a surreal landscape that seemed designed to heal wounded souls. Stepping off the plane in Reykjavik, the crisp October air filled my lungs, carrying the faint scent of sulfur from nearby hot springs, and an underlying freshness I'd never experienced before. My small downtown hotel room overlooked colorful rooftops and distant mountains, worlds away from the Boston suburbs and wedding venues I'd escaped. After settling in, I ventured out to explore the city, immediately drawn to the distinctive architecture of Hallgrímskirkja Church and the friendly bustle of locals going about their day. Utterly uninterested in American family drama, that first evening, I joined a small Northern Lights tour, where our guide Klaus explained the science behind the aurora while we waited in darkness outside the city limits. When the green and purple lights finally appeared, dancing across the sky like cosmic ballet dancers, tears streamed down my face. The beauty transcended my expectations, making human conflicts seem petty by comparison. The Swedish photographer next to me, Astrid, noticed my emotion and quietly offered me tissues. "First time seeing them?" she asked without judgment. I nodded, unable to speak. "Nature has a way of putting things in perspective," she continued. "Whatever troubles followed you here will look different when you return home." Her words felt prophetic, though I couldn't imagine how my family situation could ever transform. After returning to my hotel that night, I turned on my phone briefly to check emails, only to be bombarded with notifications. The first crisis had struck: massive flooding at the wedding venue due to unexpected autumn storms. The event space was underwater, and all weddings scheduled for the next month were being canceled, while my family scrambled to find an alternative location. I turned my phone back off and drifted to sleep beneath my thick Icelandic duvet. The next morning, I embarked on a tour of the Golden Circle, marveling at the powerful Gullfoss waterfall where rainbows formed in the mist, watching the Strákar geyser erupt every few minutes with surprisingly predictable punctuality, and walking between tectonic plates at Thingvellir National Park. Our small tour group included retired Canadian Professor Thomas, who shared fascinating geological insights, and a honeymooning couple who ironically wanted to hear all about my solo adventure, rather than discuss their recent wedding. At Thingvellir, Thomas explained how the land was literally being pulled apart by centimeters each year as the North American and Eurasian plates drifted away from each other. "Sometimes," he said philosophically, "separation creates something beautiful and new." I couldn't help but wonder if the growing distance between my sister and me might eventually create something worthwhile, too. After checking my phone that evening, I discovered the wedding had secured a new venue, a historic library downtown at 3 times the original cost. However, this victory was quickly overshadowed by news that all the bridesmaid dresses had arrived, in the wrong sizes and an unexpected shade of purple rather than burgundy, with no time for replacements. The next day took me to the black sand beaches of Reynisfjara, where massive basalt columns created natural cathedral-like structures, and powerful waves crashed against mysterious sea stacks. According to local legend, the rocks were once trolls, caught by the sunrise while trying to drag a ship to shore. I found Astrid there, professional camera in hand, capturing the otherworldly landscape. Recognizing me from the Northern Lights tour, she offered to teach me proper camera techniques. We spent hours photographing birds nesting in cliff faces and the hypnotic patterns of waves retreating through volcanic sand. When I checked my messages that evening, I learned the wedding caterer had canceled last minute after discovering Madeline. Had also booked a backup caterer, just in case, insulting the original chef. The replacement caterer was now demanding double their fee due to the last-minute nature of the event. Day 4 brought me to the Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon, where massive blue icebergs calved from a retreating glacier floated serenely toward the ocean. The juxtaposition of ancient ice against black volcanic sand created a landscape so surreal, it felt like visiting another planet. I joined a guided ice cave tour beneath Vatnajökull Glacier, where our group donned crampons and helmets to explore chambers of compressed blue ice formed over thousands of years. Inside the glacier, our guide explained how these caves were ephemeral, constantly changing and eventually disappearing as the ice melted each year, only to form new caves the following winter. "Nothing lasts forever," he said, his voice echoing, in the crystalline chamber. Not even something as solid as ice. That night, my phone revealed that the wedding coordinator had quit after a heated argument with my mother about table arrangements, leaving no one to oversee vendors or timeline. Simultaneously, social media was buzzing with a viral video of Madeline having a meltdown at her rehearsal dinner, throwing a centerpiece at a waiter who had served the wrong appetizer. The wedding was still 48 hours away, and disaster seemed to be snowballing. On my 5th day, I drove my rental car along the stunning southern coast, stopping at hidden hot springs where I soaked in naturally heated water while snowflakes gently fell around me. Later, I met an Icelandic family who invited me to their farm for coffee and homemade skyr, treating me with the warm hospitality I'd been craving from my own family. The grandfather, hearing fragments of my story, shared an Icelandic proverb: "It is when the ice breaks that it makes the most noise." The wisdom resonated deeply, suggesting that sometimes relationships must fracture completely before genuine rebuilding can occur. My voicemail that evening contained my mother's first genuinely apologetic message. "Olivia, everything is falling apart. We should have valued your organizational skills instead of, well, please call if you can." The realization struck me then. All these months, my worth to them had been measured only by what I could provide, what services I could render. My absence was only problematic now that they needed my help. That night, standing alone on a rocky outcropping, watching the northern lights ripple across the vast sky, I finally felt the full weight of my family's conditional love, but also the lightness that came with releasing my need for their approval. The day before the wedding, I was preparing for a glacier hiking expedition when my phone rang with my father's number. Normally, he texted rather than called, so the unusual contact method caught my attention. Stepping away from the tour group, into a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, I answered. "Olivia," he said, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "I know you're upset with us, and you have every right to be, but things have completely fallen apart here." The desperation in his tone was unprecedented from my typically stoic father. He detailed the cascading disasters. The replacement venue's electrical system had failed during the final walkthrough. Madeline had fired 2 makeup artists in succession. The photographer was threatening to walk after being screamed at, and Ryan's parents were now suggesting postponing the entire event. Most surprisingly, he admitted something I'd never heard from him before. "We took you for granted," he said quietly. "You've always been the one who holds everything together, who solves the problems without complaint. Without you here, we're realizing how much we've depended on you without ever acknowledging it." His words should have felt validating, but instead, they landed with a hollow ring. Years of being the family fixer, only appreciated in crisis, had created a pattern I was finally breaking by standing atop a glacier thousands of miles away. While we were still on the call, Madeline grabbed the phone from him. "Liv," she sobbed, her voice barely recognizable. "I've been horrible to you. I got caught up in everything, trying to impress Ryan's family and friends. I wanted this perfect wedding so badly that I lost sight of what matters. Please help me save my wedding. I'll do anything." The plea triggered my habitual response pattern. Drop everything. Rush to fix the situation. Put my needs last. I felt the familiar tug of obligation, the guilt rising like a tide. But something had changed in me during my Icelandic solitude. I remembered Astrid's words about perspective, Thomas's geological insights about separation creating something new, and the Icelandic grandfather's proverb about breaking ice. "I can't come home," I said finally, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. "I'm in the middle of nowhere Iceland, and my tour leaves in 20 minutes. But more importantly, I need this time for myself." Both Madeline and my father began talking simultaneously, their panic escalating, until I interrupted them. I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said I'm not coming home. After ending the call, I approached Klaus, our tour guide, who had been leading my excursions for the past several days. Over breakfast, I'd mentioned bits of my family situation, and he'd shared his own experience with family obligations in Icelandic culture. "My family crisis is peaking," I explained. "Can I speak with you for a few minutes before we leave?" His weathered face creased with kindness as he nodded, leading me to a quiet table in the hotel restaurant. I explained the situation briefly, feeling the pull between my newfound boundaries and genuine concern for my sister. "In Iceland," Klaus said thoughtfully, "we have a saying, Ekki gera ödrum það sem þú vilt ekki ad adrir geri þér. Do not do to others what you do not want others to do to you. Your family excluded you when they did not need you. Now they want to include you only because they need something from you." He paused, stirring his coffee. "But the question is not what they deserve from you, but what kind of person you want to be, regardless of their actions." His words resonated deeply. Despite everything, I didn't want my sister's wedding to collapse entirely. But I also refused to abandon my journey and healing process. The answer came to me with surprising clarity. I could offer remote assistance without sacrificing my needs. For the next hour before our glacier hike departed, I worked frantically from my hotel lobby. First, I created a comprehensive emergency vendor contact list from memories of Madeline's original planning documents, sending it to my father via email. Next, I called Taylor, who worked in event planning, asking her to coach one of the more level-headed bridesmaids through coordination duties via video call. I directed my father with a detailed script for negotiating with the venue about expedited electrical repairs, leveraging my knowledge of his business background. Through my museum contacts in Boston, I located a replacement caterer willing to take on the last-minute event, connecting them directly with Ryan's credit card information. Between these interventions, I drafted a minute-by-minute timeline for the wedding day, identifying potential problem points and offering preventative solutions. When our tour group finally departed, I had done everything possible from afar without compromising my boundaries. The glacier hike proved to be one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my life. Strapped into crampons and wielding an ice axe, I navigated crevasses and ice formations while our guide shared stories of explorers who had perished and survived in Iceland's unforgiving landscapes. The physical exertion cleared my mind, and, standing atop the massive ice field, gazing across the volcanic landscape to the distant ocean, I felt a profound sense of my own capability and resilience. That evening, exhausted but exhilarated, I discovered the wedding preparations had stabilized thanks to my remote interventions. Through Taylor's updates and social media posts from distant acquaintances, I watched the ceremony unfold from my hotel room while preparing for the next day's hike to an active volcanic crater. The contradictory emotions were intense: sadness at missing this significant day, relief at avoiding the drama, pride in my assistance despite everything, and a growing conviction that my Iceland journey represented something more meaningful than mere escape. I fell asleep that night feeling conflicted, yet somehow more whole than I had in months, perhaps years. Returning to Boston after 10 transformative days in Iceland felt like stepping into a parallel universe where I looked the same, but was fundamentally altered inside. My apartment, once filled with wedding plans and sister-related memories, now displayed souvenirs from my journey: a small lava rock, photographs of geysers and glaciers, Icelandic chocolate, and a handcrafted wool sweater. My first family encounter occurred at the subdued post-wedding brunch my parents had organized at their home. Walking through the door carrying a simple houseplant as a neutral gift, I felt the weight of accumulated tension and unresolved emotions. Conversations halted momentarily as everyone registered my presence. My mother approached first, her expression a complicated mixture of relief, lingering resentment, and uncertainty. "You look different," she said, studying my face. "More peaceful." Before I could respond, Madeline emerged from the kitchen and crossed the room with uncharacteristic hesitation. The awkward silence that enveloped us was finally broken when she spoke. "I owe you an apology," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What I did was unforgivable, excluding you from my wedding when you've always been there for me. Even after everything, you still helped save the day from another continent. I've been a terrible sister." Her public acknowledgement surprised me, especially with Ryan's family present. My mother jumped in with her typical deflection. "We didn't realize how much we needed you," she offered, somehow managing to make her statement sound simultaneously apologetic and accusatory. "The wedding would have been a complete disaster without your last-minute help." My father, standing slightly apart from the group, simply nodded and quietly added, "I should have stood up for you from the beginning." The brunch progressed with strained politeness until guests gradually departed, leaving just our immediate family. In the living room where we'd had countless family discussions, we finally addressed the elephant in the room. I spoke honestly about years of feeling undervalued, of being treated as the family support system without reciprocal consideration. Madeline admitted how easily she'd been influenced by Ryan's family's social expectations and her own insecurities about measuring up to their standards. "I convinced myself that a perfect wedding was more important than our relationship," she confessed, tears forming. "Watching everything fall apart until you stepped in showed me how wrong I was." My parents had more difficulty acknowledging their role, my mother particularly resistant to examining her favoritism. Yet even she couldn't deny the evidence of her actions when confronted directly. "I never meant to make you feel less important," she insisted, though her examples of equal treatment fell conspicuously flat. My father, in his quiet way, simply said, "We failed you. I failed you by never speaking up." As tensions eased, I shared my Iceland photos, each image telling the story of my personal journey alongside the physical one. The blue ice caves represented the beauty I'd discovered in solitude. The black sand beaches showed the stark contrast between expectations and reality. The northern lights captured moments of transcendent clarity amid darkness. Without directly stating it, the photos communicated what words couldn't: how I'd found strength and purpose independent of family validation. Madeline's interest in My adventure seemed genuine as she asked thoughtful questions about Icelandic culture and landscapes. She confessed that despite getting her perfect wedding after the last-minute saves, the experience felt hollow without me there. "I kept looking for you all day," she admitted. "Every time something went right, I wanted to share it with you. Every time something went wrong, I expected you to appear and fix it. It wasn't until you were gone that I realized our relationship was more important than any wedding. Setting new boundaries proved challenging but necessary. I explained that moving forward, I needed our relationship to be based on mutual respect rather than one-sided support. I wouldn't be available for emotional rescues without reciprocity, nor would I continue accepting last-minute demands disguised as emergencies. Surprisingly, these boundaries were met with less resistance than I'd anticipated, perhaps because my absence had tangibly demonstrated what they stood to lose. The Iceland experience catalyzed other life changes too. I accepted a curatorial position at a smaller, more innovative museum that valued my creative vision, leaving the prestigious but stifling institution where I'd spent years trying to prove my worth. I moved from my cramped apartment to a light-filled space overlooking the harbor, decorating with Icelandic-inspired simplicity. I established standards for relationships, romantic and otherwise, refusing to accept connections that didn't nurture mutual growth. My reconnection with Madeline progressed slowly on these new, more equal terms. Our first one-on-one coffee after my return was awkward, but honest. We gradually rebuilt trust through consistent small actions rather than grand promises or dramatic apologies. She made efforts to show interest in my life and career, while I allowed myself to engage with her without automatically assuming a caretaker role. My mother's progress came more slowly, her ingrained patterns requiring conscious effort to change. She still occasionally slipped into old habits of comparison or dismissal, but now I calmly pointed these out, rather than silently accepting them. The healing process continued through therapy and self-care practices I'd discovered in Iceland. The crisis had forced me to confront painful truths about family dynamics I'd normalized for decades. The most profound lesson wasn't about weddings, travel, or even family obligations, but about self-worth existing independently from others' validation. In the vast Icelandic wilderness, surrounded by geological wonders that had existed for millennia, I discovered that my value wasn't determined by my usefulness to others. As I built my new life on this foundation, I often reflected on the irony that by escaping to Iceland and letting my sister's wedding fall apart, I'd actually helped everyone, including myself, piece together something more authentic than the perfect day they'd originally envisioned. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and personal boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of self-discovery resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone struggling with family relationships or considering a solo adventure, share this video with them. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is step away, even when everyone tells us to show up. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how truthfully you live your own life.
Knowing that this girl was being controlled by someone using a slave ring, Rio removed the collar to free her, and she said that the person who ordered her to hunt her close to Rio was the noble boy who pushed Laura down. The brisk-skinned girl introduced herself as Latifa, and since she had nowhere to go right now, she begged to go with Rio. The two of them went together to the unexplored eastern land, and during an overnight camping, Rio had her mention Tokyo in her sleep. So, Rio knew that she was also the Japanese who were reincarnated into this world like him. They had headed straight for a huge oak tree to continue, and while taking a break in the middle of the road, Rio encountered a group of demi-humans. Seeing that Rio didn't show any hostility. The girl leader Sarah talked to him, but when they saw Latifah sleeping in the tent, they rushed to attack Rio because they thought he had kidnapped a person among their fellows. Rio alone couldn't resist all force, so he was quickly taken back to the demi-human village. And when Latifah regained consciousness, a misunderstanding were cleared up. So, the village chef forced the demi-human girls to quickly apologize to him. The next day, Rio was invited by the village chefs to keep the meeting with them. And they were very grateful to Rio because he protected one of their kind, Latifah. Right after that, Rio was met by a female tree spirit as well as the people's god named Dairas. And she discovered a humanoid spirit like her residing inside of Rio. Then said that he was perfectly capable of using spirit art. Rio and Latifah have been prepared by the village chefs for a beautiful tree house. And Sarah's group will also live here to protect them. In the time that followed, Rio learned spiritual art and many other new things from the people of the village. And he was considered by the people here as an extremely important friend. In a place not far from the village, Reis and one of his servants went to the dragon's cave, and he stole one of their eggs. So the dragon chased him to claim it again. Meanwhile, everyone had a party to celebrate Rio's 1-year anniversary with Latifah coming to their village. And the big-skinned girls were